Hello and welcome to The Man from Hildebrand on this wonderful, glorious, beautiful May bank holiday. Now, it would have been exactly a year ago today since I attended the James Bond Day at Ambley Museum, which was hosted by the Shaken and Stirred fan group. And again, they pretty much were exactly a year on. They were there again yesterday. Sadly, I never made the event yesterday, but I went last year and it was an absolute blast. Really fantastic weather. We had the presence of John Glenn and Anthony Waite, and both Matthew Wood and Nick Fentiman had managed to kind of arrange a commemorative plaque to celebrate and to mark the 40th anniversary since A View to a Kill was filmed at Ambley. At this year's event, I would have suspected that it would have been Matthew Wood promoting his latest book, which massive congratulations, A View to a Film, which would have focused on the filming of A View to a Kill at Ambley. And yeah, with James Bond Day, they just basically just have a load of Aston Martins and Lotuses and anything that's kind of sort of James Bond related. You also had the opportunity to actually see the carts that had the Zorin logo on, which was used within the film, but also had the chance to ride the actual locomotive which Zorin and Scarpine rode themselves. In typical kind of style, it's usually as soon as I release a video, some massive news gets released the day after that video is published. Of course, it was probably last week or the week before, actually, that we had got a big sort of announcement from Amazon MGM. They stated that the search for the next James Bond is underway. While we don't plan to comment on specific details during the casting process, we're excited to share more news with 007 fans as soon as the time is right. So it was nearly a month since CinemaCon when they said that there's nothing to report, and all of a sudden they have now begun the casting process. Denis Villeneuve is still working on Dune 3, which I believe is going to be sort of wrapped up July. So obviously as soon as he's done with that, he will then be going on to Bond 26. The casting director is said to be Nina Gold, who was the person behind the Game of Thrones franchise. Whoever is chosen as the next Bond will be obviously down to Nina, and it would have to be sort of, verified by Denis Villeneuve and, probably Amazon as well. I have read via other sources that they are looking at an actor who they would like to sign up for at least 3 or 4 films, which is good to know. How true that is, I don't know, because this was reported by somebody else other than Amazon. It is interesting because that's also the first time that we've actually had any kind of confirmation that they are looking at an actor to do multiple films. Because so far, Amy Pascal and David Heyman have just been signed to produce Bond 26. Denis Villeneuve has just been assigned to direct Bond 26. Stephen Knight is just writing Bond 26. There's been no kind of confirmation that, especially Amy Pascal and David Heyman, that they're going to be do multiple films. So this is the first time that we have kind of heard now that they are looking for an actor who is prepared to do 3 or 4 films. So yeah, and again, I mean, I kind of would probably suspect it'll be kind of midsummer to kind of autumn by the time we get an announcement. Stephen Knight is kind of spoken up once again about the development of the script for Bond 26. And what I like is every now and again we just get sort of drips and drabs sort of filtered, just seeping through, just giving us a little bit of information. With what's been said is Stephen Knight has been sort of doing his research and has been talking with a lot of like ex-SAS officers and people who work in the SAS and other outfits, if you like, just to kind of get the information, just to kind of get the knowledge. So there's kind of now a theory speculation that this could now be, the Bond 26 could just be a total reinvention, similar to Our First Light is. I mean, I know that there was a lot of speculation that, Bond 26, that should go back, be back set into the 50s and stuff. That was never the case. A lot of people thought it was, but it never was. And I certainly never was one of them who jumped on that particular belief, because, I read things that's been kind of jotted, that's been reported from the author's mouth. AI plays a big part in this. It said that the AI is the villain of Bond 26. So how could it be set in the 1950s if you've got, AI involved? I think that was just total misdirection, misinterpretation, because you had, Stephen Knight basically saying that he's looking at the early Fleming novels for inspiration, and people just thought, oh, well, it must be set in the 50s then. This will be Bond set in the present time, but it's a Bond that hasn't served his time with the Royal Navy, but it's probably former SAS or something. I mean, Stephen Knight has worked and has adapted Ben Macintyre's novel, SIS Rogue, which was adapted for the BBC. A while back, Stephen Knight was asked who his favourite Bond was and what his favourite film was, and he kept very tight-lipped in fear that whatever he would say would probably give the game away and give the clue away to which direction he was going. He has now said that Sean Connery was his favourite Bond, and I'm thinking that I reckon From Russia with Love could have been his favourite Bond film, and I reckon that's probably kind of what he's trying to sort of, for Bond 26, has to kind of feel is trying to probably get, because with From Russia with Love, yes, I mean, it's a second Bond film, and it is a fantastic film. I've always called it the sort of epitome of a spy thriller. It's a Cold War, gritty thriller. It's a dangerous game of cat and mouse. You've just got stuff which you would expect in a typical spy film. And the thing with From Russia with Love is there's moments where it feels very 1950s. Doesn't necessarily feel 1960s. It's just a style and how it's filmed. As I say, with Stephen Knight, things are slowly, being drip fed to us over, weeks and months. And we are beginning to build a picture of what to expect. For Bond 26, I'm thinking it's going to be kind of like a From Russia with Love style. It's going to be sort of down-to-earth. I mean, Knight himself said that it's not going to be any fancy gadgets. It's going to be just Bond relying on his wit, which is pretty much what he did in From Russia with Love. What else has been happening in the world of Bond? Hurricane Room is now been released, and I will be buying it in the next week or so. I'm going to pop down to Waterstones and buy it. Now, I think I might have mentioned last time that the reviews for this are sounding quite good. James Bond appears in this one. He's been kidnapped or something, but is back. This again is, I believe, kind of like a sort of a different interpretation of Bond. Of course it's still to a degree Fleming's character, but it's obviously been updated. Is this the Bond that what Jeffrey Deaver gave us in Carte Blanche, which that was a total revamp of the literature character. Jeffrey Deaver's Bond was born in 1979. Without reading Hurricane Room, I don't really know, but I'm kind of wondering, with the age and with the timeline, could that be sort of, Jeffrey Deaver's character, interpretation of Bond coming over? And of course, we've got King Zero as well, coming out in September. So it's kind of interesting to know what Charlie Higson would give us with his interpretation of Bond. That alone is worth an episode of itself, because I feel that 2026 is basically a renaissance of Bond. But yeah, I will have to really kind of pluck up the courage to actually give Kim Sherwood's trilogy a go. So yes, Hurricane Room is out. Now, of course, on the same day, I think it was on the 21st, they had the world premiere of First Light in London. Calvin Dyson was there, as well as other sort of Bond influencers. That's out at the end of this week on the 27th. They have already released like the first 13 minutes of the game, and it just looks really cool. So yeah, I'm kind. It won't be long before somebody will actually just do it like an edit and make it into like a 2-hour film, which you can watch on YouTube. I'm still kind of into I'm not a massive gamer, and I just I don't know. I just can't justify spending £500 just on a PS5. So a few people like Calvin Dyson and a few others have received an advanced copy and stuff. I know Calvin Dyson has received, I think it was the VIP edition with the game and the Golden Gun. Now, I kind of, I kind of slated it saying, well, that's like 260 quid. It's a lot of money. But what Calvin kind of sort of showed us on his channel was it comes with like a personalised video of the guy in the mask which talks to you. And so obviously when you pre-order, you put your name and address in and stuff, and they will then personalise this message, so it'll say your name. I can't remember what it was, but otherwise it was really cool. It came with Scaramanga's Golden Gun, which unfortunately you can't get out of the box. It's kind of stuck in. One young girl, I don't know who she was probably, had her own channel and stuff, and she'd kind of received this particular set with the Golden Gun, and I just thought, you know what, you have not got a clue the significance of that Golden Gun. She just thought, oh look, yeah, there's a gun. I would be very surprised if she knew what film it was and who it belonged to and how iconic that is in the franchise. She was quite young, so I would imagine that possibly some of the Daniel Craig films may have, been part of her childhood. If not, I think First Light is probably going to be something new. Because what's going to happen is with First Light, there's going to be a handful of people which is going to be their experience with Bond. They would never have heard of, Doctor No or Sean Connery's James Bond or Roger Moore's James Bond. In the past, I've had people who just saw Daniel Craig was James Bond and he did 5 films. They didn't realise there was like a 60-year history and there's like 20 films previous played by 5 other actors. They just was not aware of that. And it's the same with First Light. You are going to get people coming in and just thinking, wow, this is cool. And then obviously Bond 26 comes in and then, oh, okay, there's a film now. But the chances of them actually knowing that there's 5 films previous starring Daniel Craig, or a 20 plus, 20 films before that starring 5 other actors, it's I don't know, it's going to be, and they just don't know what they're going to walk into. As soon as they discover First Light and discover the history, they're going to be just blown away, because yeah, the history of Bond is pretty immense. I'm sitting in, a good 30 years of collecting, that represents 60 plus years of Bond itself. The First Light was premiered on Thursday. The biggest highlight was, for me, was for Amiga. Now, I'd said this a while back, that Amiga may just release the First Light watch, and fuck me, they did. I was kind of expecting it, but at the same time I was thinking I would be surprised, because I just don't think it's kind of their thing. And there has been a few comments online saying, well, it's a bit of a tenuous link and all this, because it's now a, kind of connected to a video game and not to a Bond film. I kind of get it, but then I thought, you know what, James Bond is an ambassador for Amiga. They have such a strong relationship for, 31 years, since GoldenEye. And I mean, I just wouldn't be surprised, to read the latest Amiga model in future Bond novels. King Zero, Charlie Eagleson, Bond may well be wearing the latest Amiga then. Obviously it was June last year when First Light was first announced, when they gave us a bit of a trailer, and that's when I first saw the watch. I thought, oh, and I can remember just sort of Googling the watch and discovering that that particular model does exist, but it just wasn't within those colours. But now, yeah, the watch itself, it's a lovely watch. I like it. It's got an 8S strap. It's chronograph. Whether or not this is a limited edition one, I don't know, but it's retailing at £7,900. This is the first time Bond has worn a chronograph, I believe, since A View to a Kill. He had a Seiko chronograph in that. And yes, but Amiga and Bond, they have really, really kind of indulged in their sort of relationship. And I would think that obviously when Amazon had taken over, they would have had an agreement with Amiga. They would have sort of come on board with IO Interactive, and they would have, between them, incorporated Amiga into it. Sources tell me that Amiga have already signed up for Bond 26. But yeah, the First Light, I was surprised, and I really like it. And all I'm going to say is, watch this space. The thing is, it's just the fact that it's the first time it's ever been associated with a game. Now, I'm not saying this is, that Amiga are going to go down the gaming route, but they are, going to be going down with James Bond. Wherever Bond goes, whatever medium, whatever platform, they're going to go along with it. The thing with First Light is, we've got the Corgi Valhalla coming out in the summer. We've got Coca-Cola bringing out sort of First Light design packaging, kind of related cans. We have apparently got a First Light Gillette razor out there, which I'm still need to see. And now we've got the First Light Amiga. Audemars Brown have released a shirt as seen in First Light, but it's not really marketed as First Light. What else to expect? I think now David Strisky over the Bond Experience, he interviewed Flight, who was doing the music, and he kind of, what they were saying is that there's probably a good chance that the First Light score would be available to download or to be on CD. All the music that they've done in the past for various computer game projects have always been released. So hopefully, I think, you know, that's probably the next thing that they could do, is release the soundtrack. I also had a bit of a thought the other day that, you know, could we maybe get a novelisation of the video game? Now, that may seem crazy, but I believe Raymond Benson, he had done some novelisations of Metal Gear Solid films into a series of novels. And I mean, I'm not saying that they'll get Raymond Benson on board, but I'm kind of, you know, thinking it's a possibility. This year is going to be absolutely manic for Bond fans, because it's kind of like 1983 all over again. You know, you've kind of got two Bonds at the same time. You know, you also have Sean Connery coming back in the Never Say Never Again, and then you had Roger Moore in Octopussy. This is the same. You know, this is a year where, so far as we know, you've got two brand new faces playing Bond in different mediums. But the weird thing is that it's all under one roof. There's no sort of separate rogue outfit. It's all Amazon. You know, we've got Patrick Gibson coming in, you know, giving us Bond. We've got whoever coming in, you know, to then give us Bond for Bond 26. I wouldn't be surprised if they might actually say, you know what, Patrick, do you fancy starting in a film? Why not? It kind of makes sense. Yeah, I think that's it for today. It's a bit of a news roundup. So, you know, we now know that Amazon have begun the casting process for the next Bond. Hurricane Room is now out. And yes, I now think that I should maybe pluck up the courage to give them a read. First Light is at its premiere, and that's coming out on the 27th of this month of May. And of course, we have now got the First Light watch from Amiga. I would suspect the next kind of big thing to expect from First Light, apart from the game itself, is a soundtrack release. Yeah, and obviously, you know, and Stephen Knight spoken is kind of gave us a bit more information on what to expect from Bond 26. So I think that's it for now. So anyway, thank you once again. Don't forget to like and share. That's it for now, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye. You also had the opportunity to actually see the cards that had the Zorin logo on, which was used within the film, but also had the chance to ride the actual locomotive which Zorin and Scarpine rode themselves.